fun.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
What did you guys check out? Anything fun?
We went to the con, and it's my son and my wife's first time, and they were just like, wow. I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit of sensory overload.
Okay, yeah.
But they were fine. They made it, so they did great.
So what was something unique about Jon Stewart's story that you wanted to bring to life, especially an iconic character like this, like a different variant of that you wanted to bring forward in this movie?
I think because we're building a different kind of universe feel to this, I think we want to do a different interpretation for what Jon was. I think more than anything, we want to give him something that he hasn't had really before this, which is like his own like animated version of an origin, so that it was unique in what he was doing, not just what we did on all the other stuff. So that was a pretty exciting process to do when we first looked at it. So.
I was mentioning earlier that the original story of Jon Stewart, you guys are doing something a little different. Because when I asked about comic book lore, what its origin is to influence the movie, he was saying that there was going to be something different. Can you tease a little bit about what specifically that is, or different things that we can expect to see that maybe pay homage to the comics versus what you guys are bringing new to this movie?
Butch won't say it, but he is a huge comic book guy, gigantic. He has, every time I see him when he's in Burbank, he's like got a library of books from 30, 40 years of collecting. You know, he knows everything, not just about the characters, but he also knows the entire like history of the creators that are in all those comic books. So he's not speaking from a point of like, oh, I just feel like doing this. No, he has a definitive vision on what he's trying to get at. And so my job was just interpret it. So I can't say a lot to what your question is, but I can tell you where Butch was going with it. Yeah.
So excited for the movie. It looks amazing.
Great. We're very excited about it.
Is there a favorite moment that you have specifically that happened in the movie, or as you were just saying, things like the interactions that were coming off that you're excited for audience to see, or if it didn't end up in the movie that you were still excited that it at least happened?
I think the line of Jon Stewart's PTSD and him coming back to it was one of those things that I was most excited about telling through that story, because we were a little inspired by Apocalypse Now and that idea of going back into the fray, of doing the fighting the fight. But this was like a superhero's version of it, a positive kind of view of it on the end, instead of a horrible negative, story of like war is horrible. And we agree. I'm not saying I don't agree war is horrible, but the idea of a character going, no, there's a fight that's worth it. And I want to step into it, because Jon Stewart in this is a hero. So what is the hero? He steps back into it, even though there's a personal price to it, but he's willing to accept that in order to do the right thing. And we see it from the beginning, because he runs into the ship fire, full on fire. It's like, is there anyone in there? He doesn't even know it's an alien ship, but he went anyways. And we want to show that right from the beginning. That's who he is.
Into your cast, that members that you have, and like the dynamics between the characters, even through voice acting, what were some key moments that made you go, oh, I need to cast you, or part of you like this works and connects because like of how they deliver those lines?
So I don't make decisions on the cast or anything like that, but there are moments, it happens in every movie, is that you hear a read and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't think of it in that point of view, and we'll actually go with what the actor did. And sometimes there's accidents, sometimes they're like, oh no, I saw it this way, and we're like, that's great, we're going to go with that. I mean, we did something like that with Wonder Woman, where we saw something during the middle of it, of like a relationship. We're like, oh no, they're closer than they seem to be, and this was the same thing, was like all this Hodges interpretation was a little lower key on it, and he wasn't like even though he does have that presence, I think, on the screen of like being that main character, he wasn't like loud or brash or anything like that. There was a definitive attitude for him through the whole thing, and it made it exactly what it needed to be. And it's kind of like, until you hear it, you don't really feel that as much, where you're like, no, that's where Apocalypse Now is, that right there. So
that was going to be my next question, is like, what other things like to honor Jon Stewart's story, because we have Hal Jordan and he's an amazing character, but how did you, like, my question was going to be separating Hal Jordan, not necessarily like passing on a torch, because it's not like a passing, because they're two separate entities, but how to give Jon Stewart his own presence and not make it all about Hal and make it more about Jon.
That was one of the decisions we made during it, but also like, I mean, Jon's story, I mean, if you look at Hal's history, right, he's a brash, smart aleck kind of guy, and he was like, I don't want this. All right, I'll take it. You know, and he goes and does his thing, and he becomes this great Green Lantern. John Stewart isn't the same person, right? And so the approach we had to say is this is a different person with a different history, with different motivations, different reasons for what he's doing. But it still has to be a way that these Owens said, yeah, he's the one we want to pick to be the next one. It makes perfect sense that's who they would pick. We had to make sure that it was distinct from Hal, and Hal's a smart, cracking, you know, kind of character. John's not. He's a different guy, and you can tell that from the original Justice League. That's not what he was. He's much more serious about what he does, and we have to have a reason for that, and I think that's where a lot of this came from.
Awesome.
All right.
I feel so bad.
I hope I answered all of them, and maybe I shot off on my own tangent, but I hope it answered your questions.
Great, I'm excited.
Great.
Listen, when I saw on the internet, like, because I finished the first one right up until like the Apocalypse War and stuff like that. I cried, by the way. And then the new movies that were coming out when they said it was the Tomorrowverse, I was so curious, and like I love the different spin that's happening with the Tomorrowverse.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, we never named that. Like, who came up with that?
It just showed up. I was like, I saw it on Twitter, and I was on Twitter, and I was just like, wait, what is this? Did someone? And I go to WB, and I'm like, no, I don't think they've said anything. I never heard anything about it. But I was like, a bunch of people are naming it. I'm like, yeah, it works. Exactly. All right, I'm okay with it.
It's the Tomorrowverse, like that's what it's called. Is that like this huge timeline?
I know nothing about anything of anyone naming it that. I just saw it on Twitter, and that was it.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for taking the time to sit with us.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, guys.
Excited for the movie.
I'm glad you are. Thanks, guys.